and welcome to On Deadline. I'm Kendra Nichols.
I'm Amanda St. Hilaire.
And I'm Dennis Owens.
If you're listening for the first time, we are journalists for ABC 27 News in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
But on this podcast, we talk about issues that affect people all over.
These are the conversations you don't hear on the news. We are different generations with different experiences, so we don't always agree.
But we do get very personal, get very real, and hopefully get you thinking. We are recording on January 16th, 2018. And speaking of getting personal, we intro every podcast by telling you how we are different generations with different perspectives. So today we decided we would give you some insight into us. We have each come up with a couple questions to ask each other. Now, this could be interesting because we are used to asking the questions and not always having to answer them. So who knows what's going to happen?
Like this.
Yeah, all right. So the point of all this is to help you understand us a little better. Because I'm thinking some of these people are listening are probably, why do they think that way? Or where did they come up with this? And, you know, a lot of who we are has to do with where we've been. So I'm going to start. And look, this is such a basic question. I know, so boring, but it does give you insight into a person. So we'll start with ladies first. Amanda?
Sure.
Let's talk about where you were born and just tell us a little bit about your family dynamic.
Sure. So I was born in Manchester, New Hampshire. My dad grew up there, had lived there his entire life. My mom is Canadian. She's from Quebec. French is her first language. She moved to Manchester, New Hampshire when she was 8 years old. It was a very large community of French Canadian Americans. So spent the first part of my childhood in New Hampshire. I have 5 younger brothers. We were all there. And then my dad got a job in the Harrisburg area when I was 15.
Oh, I bet you loved that.
I had just turned 15. I put together a presentation for my
Well, you were 15
parents.
going on 25, I'm sure.
Yeah. So it was just before my sophomore year of high school, and I was so mad. I was so mad at them. I had just started at the public high school in our area. I had switched schools. I had just made my friends. This was the worst thing that they could possibly do. So I put together a presentation for my parents about why we shouldn't move to Harrisburg. Because when I looked it up, the first thing I saw was 3 Mile Island. And I was like, well, this is an irresponsible parenting decision. And they were like, this is great. We love the initiative. You're coming with us.
Right.
So we moved here, and it ended up being the best thing that could have ever happened to our family. We got so much closer because of it, especially the first few weeks we were out here. We really only had each other.
Right.
And I made some of my best friends those first few weeks of school at Cumberland Valley. And liked the area so much that after I graduated college and worked in Ohio for a few years, I really wanted to come back. Yeah, so it's funny how all those things work out.
And I'm sure mom and dad are thrilled about that.
Yes,
All
yes,
right.
they're very happy.
And they should be. How about you?
Okay, so I was born in Philadelphia, went to Catholic schools until 8th grade. In 8th grade, Christmas time of 8th grade, talk about moving at a weird time. Christmas time of 8th grade, I've been in the same Catholic school the entire time. Moved to the West Coast, first to Washington State. My dad was in, he worked for Sunoco, you know the gas station Sunoco.
Yes.
That stands for Sun Oil Company. And they had a company that made the ships that went down and got the oil, Sun Ship. Well, he worked for Sun Ship. They put a subsidiary in Seattle, shipping between Seattle and Alaska. And he took a job there, so off we go to Washington State. We didn't like Washington State too much, to be honest with you. Seattle, it's kind of dreary.
Yeah,
People
rainy.
are different there from Philly guys, you know what I'm saying? And so then we moved to Southern California, which was much better in my view.
Sounds very pleasant.
Yes, you know, the majority of people were blonde. You know, I saw lots of blonde girls in junior and senior year of high school. It was a wonderful time.
Dennis.
I feel like I should set a timer for every podcast episode about like what part of Dennis's comments I'll start shaking my head at.
Well,
This is fairly early
Now
on.
listen, he was a young teenage boy.
So high school, exactly.
Yeah.
High school, graduated at a place called El Toro High School, which was it used to be a Marine base was there, a very, very prominent Marine base, actually. And then I came back to Philadelphia to go to college, LaSalle. My uncle was a Christian brother. My dad's brother was a Christian brother and the registrar at LaSalle. So we got it half price. So there was about 47 seconds thought as to where I was going to college.
You're
right?
going.
So went to LaSalle. And then after LaSalle, my parents happened to move to a place called Bakersfield, California, which is a small market, which all the teachers are saying you got to go start in a small market.
Yes.
So I went out to Bakersfield, lived at home for a little while, got a job in Bakersfield, my first TV job in Bakersfield, and then would always come east. And when coming east, what's close to Philly, because you're not going to just jump from Bakersfield to Philadelphia, at least at the time. Harrisburg was kind of close. I drop some tapes off and get a call, and I was a sportscaster here for a couple of years.
Tapes. What are tapes?
That's exactly right.
People are like, what?
That's exactly right. So from
You tape your Christmas presents?
Now you just email, right? Yeah. Your resume reel. So from 1993 I came, and from 1993 to 1999 I was a sportscaster. And then they decided they wanted to do kind of a more fun show, a Live at 5 show, Monday through Friday with Flora Pastorero. So I did that for a number of years. And then I think the conventional wisdom was, after 2011, people got more serious. And that whole, doing light and fluffy stuff,
Right.
maybe there wasn't the audience for that. So then I switched to do news. In the meantime, I met an Amanda, who was a reporter here at ABC 27.
Different Amanda.
Different Amanda. Amanda Martin was her name. And we got married. We have 3 children. And, doing a podcast, doing Capitol reporting, doing This Week in Pennselsvania, doing all kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah.
And chasing children around.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
It's one of the most fun
Never
parts,
ending.
right? How about you, Kendra?
So I was born at Polyclinic Hospital, which is no longer, but I grew up in New Cumberland. I am an only child. Poor me. My mom
So you didn't get any attention growing up?
None.
It's
My mom-
explaining a lot, actually. I should point out, I'm the 4th boy. I have a younger sister. My mom kept going until she got her girl, but I'm one of 5.
Oh, wow. So I'm the spoiled only child amongst us.
Apparently.
My mom actually had me very young. She was 19, single mother. And back in 1976, that was often frowned upon. So I give my mom now, reflecting, looking back, a lot of respect, what she had to go through raising me. I didn't meet my biological father till I was about 16. Lucky for me, I had my dad, who came into my life when I was like 4. So I had him growing up. So I had that father figure, and he was amazing because he brought into my life parachuting, flying, all kinds of fun stuff. He taught my mom how to fly. So my weekends growing up as a spoiled only child, I got to go to the airports, watch people parachuting, flying. I was flying since I was like 4 or 5 years old.
No mishaps?
No. In fact, my dad told me I was a better pilot when I was 5 than when I was 16. Because when I was 5 and he'd say, do this, push in the mixture,
You'd do
I
it.
just did it. And when I was 16, I'd be like, why?
You were thinking for yourself.
Yes. And he'd be like, just do it. So I did actually log a couple hours. I did not go on to get my license because I was too boy crazy and into cheerleading and stuff like that. Now that I'm 41, I'm thinking, man, I should have done that. But then again, I do have something in common with all of you. We did move. About 7th grade, and of course, I was very mad. I did not do a presentation to my parents, but we moved from New Cumberland to Dillsburg. I was very mad because
Big
Dillsburg
move.
Is that a move?
Well, yes, it was to me. Because
How many miles
Now
is that?
listen here. You have
6.
to understand. I went from New Cumberland, this cute little town, to Dillsburg with dirt roads. No
more
grocery
spread
store.
out.
I mean, this was a big move, people. I mean, and I had no neighbors, so there were no kids around me. So to me, I was very upset. I had to ride the bus. It was an hour bus ride, okay,
my gosh.
to Dover. And I did graduate from Dover High School. Went to Shippensburg University. I got my first TV job in this little podunk town in Tennessee called Harriman. And I said it wrong. I, of course, called it Harryman because it was spelled Harriman. And, of course, all the people there were like, listen, Yankee, you're saying that wrong. And then went from Tennessee to Blue Ridge Cable in Ephrata. And then to ABC 27. I grew up watching ABC 27, so I was very happy. In fact, I would watch you, Dennis.
Go ahead. Well, remind me. I want to say something about
Go
that.
ahead, say
Well, I just want to say I really respect you came here. Not as you didn't walk in as an on-air person. I mean, you came here and you were doing computer
web
stuff
person.
and a web person.
You worked your way up.
And really you knew what you wanted. You were driven, and you're actually very, very good on television.
Thank you.
You say that as though you're surprised. You're
No,
actually
I'm not
very, very
surprised, but I am. But I credit her.
Yeah, I know what
The
you
point
mean.
being, she's good.
Just
She could have
giving
been
you a hard
somewhere
time.
else,
Right.
but you stayed and really
Yes.
focused.
I've actually been asked that many times why I've stayed here and not moved on. And the answer to that is because I have family. This business is not great when you have a family, and I need the family support. And all of my family lives here. My mom is one of 9, and they're all around here. And I would have lost my job 1,000 times over because think of all the snow days we've had to stay here,
Yeah.
and what would I have
When
done
you
with
have
my
kids,
children?
yeah.
Well, I joke about you and James Crummell. You can't go about 15 feet without somebody saying they're related to either you or James Crummell.
That is true.
It was my first week at the station. I went out with you on a story, and on the drive back, you were like, "Oh, that's my cousin. No, that's my other cousin."
It is true. All right, so let's move on to something a little more fun. What's your most embarrassing moment on TV?
Well, actually, for me, that's really easy. It was one of my first live reports in Toledo, Ohio. It was a morning live report. And I was doing this. I was so proud of myself. I was doing this like interactive morning live hit with electric cars, and I was starting in the car and getting out of the car.
Oh, no.
And the cable from my earpiece caught on the side of the seat of the car, and I get up and it pulled me back, and I fell on my bottom on live television. Live TV.
Wait, do we still have this
It
somewhere
was-
that we can add a little link?
The clip might exist somewhere. I thought I destroyed it, but it's this digital age where nothing's ever really gone.
Yeah, it's still out there somewhere.
It was funny. It was really funny. But especially early on when I was 21 years old. Like
Oh
you're
my
already
gosh, it was
nervous.
probably, like, so devastating.
You're already,
Oh.
and I was so proud of myself for this cool live report. So it was a good dose of humility.
Yeah.
And a lesson that the unexpected can happen, and you just have to roll with it and be able to laugh at yourself.
Yeah.
But it
So
was
I-
pretty embarrassing.
You're pretty darn good too. You have very few of those.
Aw,
in there.
thanks, Dennis.
We all have those moments.
But I have two. One, I was relatively early here. I was a sportscaster, and same idea. So Greg Mace, who was the sports director, longtime sports director here, he was down at a bowl game, and I was the only guy here. And so you have to do every show, and he's doing shows on at the bowl game, and I believe it was the Rose Bowl. Yeah, it was '94, Penn State Rose Bowl, and I had bronchitis, but I have no choice but to work, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm doing a sportscast, and my nose would not stop running. And
Oh no.
and there's what can you do?
What do you
You're
do?
on camera.
Yeah.
And then when we hit video or we hit a soundbite, and Rick Wagner, the anchor at the time, hands me a Kleenex, and I do it, but
It wouldn't stop.
It wouldn't stop, and there was nothing I could do. So that's kind of a little personally embarrassing, but there's really was nothing
Nothing you
much I
could
can do. But most recently, and it was really a humbling moment for me, but a reminder that if you ever think you're ahead of yourself, you get over your skis too much, you can get in trouble in this business. And this happened at the inauguration of Donald Trump. So I'm in this business now. By the way, in May here, it'll be 25 years. I've been doing this over 30. And I was trying to think of how to sum up this day. There were some protesters, but not a lot.
Right.
There was a lot of people celebrating.
Your typical inauguration.
It was an
Yeah.
inauguration. It was, but obviously this is a controversial president. And so I wanted to try to sum up what's this all about. And so I've been thinking all day long about Abraham Lincoln. His second inaugural, the Civil War had just ended, right? I mean, there are worse times in our history for a president to be inaugurated,
Sure,
right? And there
yeah.
are more challenging times. And so I wanted to and Abraham Lincoln had a great quote in that second inaugural, which I thought of the first sentence of it, and I know this up one side and down the other, but blanked on it on the air.
Oh,
and
I
the
hate
saying
that.
is, with malice toward none, with charity for all, right? So the point is, he's saying to the nation, we just had this terrible war, but we need to come together.
Yeah.
And the spirit has to be with malice toward none, with charity for all. I thought it perfectly summed up
right.
kind of the Donald Trump, here's where we need to go. Yeah. So I got that with malice toward none, and for some reason, the charity for all part went completely
It
out of
happens.
my head. And I couldn't, and I'm on the air, and then the more you strain for it,
Oh, it makes
the
it
more
worse. Yeah.
it only makes it
I
worse.
had I called you shortly after that because I had a question about something, and I said, "Hey, Dennis, how are you?" And you said, "I just had the world's worst live TV moment. How are you?"
But my point to you is, you can even have that when you're a
Right.
long time
Yeah, it just
professional, and my mind just blanks. So now I always make sure if there's that one quote I want to, I write it down and have it in front of me. I
Yes.
don't always look at it, but I have it
You
there
have it in
if I
case.
need to go. And Alicia was very gracious. She took it back, and then, it immediately came to me afterwards, and I had 14 texts before I even got off the air.
With the-
14
with the-
texts with the quote,
And you're like,
to
yeah,
which I
thanks.
responded to all of them, where
Thank
were you
you.
30 seconds ago? So anyway, and then Eric Finkenbinder, who was the weather guy, was after that. He came on and finished the quote for me, so the viewers at least were reminded. But it was
Yeah.
a humbling moment. It was
happens.
I think we need those moments sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
to remind you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Kendra?
There's many, I'm sure, but I think the one that sticks out to me is when I was first anchoring down in Tennessee. You're trying to make that transition from being a college student to a professional, and you're trying, you really want to put a
Really
good
want to be
impression out there.
grown up. Yeah.
To this day, I don't know why this happened, but I'm sitting there anchoring, and I go, "Coming up tonight at sex." I mean sex. I mean six. And I don't know why, but sex just kept coming out of my mouth when I was trying to say 6. And I was like, why is this happening to me?
Oh my gosh.
Why was that happening to you?
I have no idea. And it just kept, and I was like, and even when I tried to correct myself, it came out as that.
And then you get too far in your own head.
And then I was like, oh my gosh, I could feel my face burning on air. I got home and my neighbors were like, you said sex. And I'm like,
not once but twice.
I'm like, yes, I know. Thank you very much. I mean,
and did that happen here or in Tennessee?
Oh, wait, in Tennessee, thank goodness. I mean, and before people had YouTube to replay it and make a song out of it.
Well, and that is the funny thing now, is not funny, not really funny. They never go away, right?
Yeah, I know.
I think the word you were looking for is mortified.
That's like nuclear waste. It doesn't go anywhere.
Now that happens, you wind up on Jimmy Kimmel.
Well, exactly.
Yeah, so that's why I'm thankful it happened there. And the only other thing, and unfortunately I think you can find this on YouTube, we had this cooking show down there called What's Cookin', and my old boss thought it'd be funny to post the intro to it. It is so embarrassing because it's like,
and you said this is online?
I know. Yeah,
Where
it's really.
What's Cooking with Kendra?
Yes, and I think the other girl was Jenny, but the open was, hey, good looking, what you got cooking? And we made all these silly, dumb and we're like, oh, it's so bad. And when I look
feel
back,
like
I think we
I've
need to look
seen
that
this.
up now.
yes, it's so embarrassing.
I feel like I've seen this.
We
need to look it up.
In good fun. It was,
Yes.
funny.
I think we're going to link it in show notes.
I have a question for the group. If you could go back and tell yourself anything, so if looking back when you were 22, 23 years old, and you could tell your younger self something, what would it be? And
Investment planning.
And do you think you would have listened, is the second part of that question.
No.
Investment planning or something with a pension. I didn't understand pension when I was a young man, and now that I'm towards the on the later, I'm the older of the generation of the 3 generations here, and I understand what a pension's all about and how wonderful it is for the people getting it.
How they're going away.
Well, they're mostly going away. They don't exist in the private sector, but it was something I would have focused on a little more. And maybe something more in finance, this industry. But you chase what you love, and I've never. My wife and I were just having a serious conversation about what are we doing here? Where's the industry going?
Yeah.
What do you want to do next? That kind of thing. And I truly love what I do, and there's never a day I dread coming to work. And I'm sure there's some people that do, and I haven't had to do that my entire career, and that's a blessing.
And that's a tough balance with the love of what you do, and then there are certain practical realities you have to take into consideration. Like Kendra, you were talking about having kids in this business, and I think for all of us who really love what we do day in and day out, that can be a tough one. And when you're 22 and 23, you're not thinking about that.
No.
There was an email, Amanda, you sent me last week, and I sent you an email back saying, "Why aren't you a lawyer making $1 gazillion?" Because you have some very great skills in that area, and debate.
Yeah, I think much to the chagrin of my husband sometimes.
I'd have to say I agree with Dennis on the finance, especially in our business. People believe that we make all of this money, and we just don't. My first job, I was making $18,000 a year with no insurance, and there was no opportunity to save. It was just survive at that point. Yeah. I think I looking back, I should have managed my money better, like saving, things like that. But I also think, looking back, the things that I would stress about in my 20s are so trivial now. I'm like, why did I ever get upset or worried about those things? But again, you don't listen to yourself. Because at that time, my mom would tell me, what are you doing? And you're just like, I got this.
You don't understand
I'm 21.
me.
I know what I'm doing. And I think that actually is just something we have to go through in life to develop who we are. But yeah, looking back, you always hear, I wish I knew then what I know now, of course. But I just think that's part of life. You got to go through it. Yeah. Do you have another good one for us?
Let's see. Well, actually, because both of you have kind of interesting stories with this, I'd like to know how you segued into the world of investigative reporting. So I know, Dennis, we've talked about how you got your start in sports.
Yeah.
And how you transitioned into that. And Kendra, you worked your way up the ladder.
Wow. Okay. So for me,
it's a whole different beast, investigative reporting.
It absolutely is. And I will, just being honest, at first I wasn't sure if I would like it. Before, we were doing day turns, meaning you invest 8-9 hours a day into this story, and you go home and you move on with your life.
And then you move to the next story.
Right. When we do these
There's some good things and bad things about that.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, the bad things is you can't go as in depth. The good thing is you've done your job for the day. You feel accomplished. I got it done, and you go home. These stories can go on for months, weeks,
Sometimes more than a
and
year.
it can consume you. And then sometimes I'm starting to second guess every little detail. Or what about? And I think that can be frustrating. It's different. I do, however, and not to sound like I'm pitching here, I do think we are offering the viewers in this area something that they're not getting elsewhere, because they are giving us the time to really, truly look into these things and answer some of the questions that sometimes we cannot due to time limitations. So
And-
I think it was just a natural progression for me because I'd been at the station for so long. I'd been reporting, and I felt like this was the natural next step for me.
And industry wide, in local news departments, investigating is rare. So that's not just
It goes through like ebbs and flows where suddenly it will get really popular and then it kind of goes away and then it comes back a little bit.
for me. Most of it centers around my beat, which is the Capitol, and it's an opportunity to go beyond. Okay, this bill is pushing this thing, or what's the real story behind it?
Right. How did you go from sports to that? Was that the
Well,
natural progression after
and
Live
to be
at
honest,
5?
I had one of the best stories I've ever done. Was as a sportscaster
I
when a
know
fellow
which one
named
you-
Curtis
yep,
Enos, which was a
yep.
Penn State running back, and an agent was buying him
Yeah.
suits at a Harrisburg mall before he was eligible to be having an agent, and that was a huge story at
I
the time.
remember it.
And I've always, I don't know how to say this diplomatically. I love sports. Okay, I'm from Philadelphia. Go Eagles! I'm huge. It's in my blood. But when you're a sportscaster, you start to be doing the same thing. So if it's October, you're doing this, and if it's May, you're doing
You get
this.
into a routine.
It's a routine, and there isn't much deviation from the routine. You can do some really good feature stories. There's great feature stories in sports, and I love to see those. And our guys that we have now do great jobs with them. But it got to be a bit limiting, and so I was looking for a fresh new challenge, and so jumped over to news and then into the Capitol because I've always loved politics as well. I just like that it's different every day as opposed to sports where
Right. It's kind of the
it's kind
repetition.
of the repetition.
For you, it was a natural fit. I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah,
She's
I
already
mean,
investigating.
I'm a big nerd, and I've always I love local government, and it sounds so nerdy and so focused, but and we talk about this all the time on this podcast, but that is what affects you most. Who is representing you at your township, on your school board, at the county level? They have a tremendous amount of power, and we give them a lot of power, and we don't really think about it. And that has always been interesting to me. And I grew up going to public meetings because my parents were fighting court cases against our local school district about how they the services that they were giving and were not giving to students with disabilities. So growing up and watching that had a really big effect on me. And public records kind of, it goes right along with that. So when I was working in Toledo, which was my first job out of school in Toledo, Ohio, I had some for our current news director. He was my boss in Toledo. He hired me right out of school. He gave me the opportunity to do some investigative work there, and I instantly fell in love with it, with the process of getting records and what agencies will and won't give you. And it is something that really affects democracy that very few people pay attention to.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. So when I came here, I just kind of continued to do that as we were doing, as you called them, day turns. There was stuff going on in Steelton that progressed to learning about some issues with zoning in Lower Paxton Township. And then when we started the investigative unit, that was the opportunity to really expand the scope of what we were looking at. But what I like about what we have going is we all kind of have those different strengths and those different areas we're interested in, and we bounce ideas off each other a lot. So I feel like that helps all of our reporting. That's the part I most enjoy.
I would agree. Yeah. What about you, Dennis? Any good questions for us? Any hard-hitting questions? No, I don't have a
I know
pension.
usually people aren't
No.
asking you to ask them questions, and it's usually people are running away when they see you coming at them at the Capitol.
Actually, you're the Mike Wallace of this group. That when there's the
Please.
the knock on the door, they're like, "Uh-oh, what's she want to know?"
Well, you and I are the disruptors, according to a recent Right to Know battle.
Yeah. Well, for Amanda, I just want to know, did you, how did you become a 50-year-old in a 25-year-old body?
My parents will argue it was always that way. I have report cards from first grade that say, Amanda is a very serious little girl.
Yes.
And we would pretty much saying we would like it if she would lighten up a little bit.
And see, my report card, I was just looking back on it, actually, the nuns, Dennis has a tendency to talk in class.
Mine said I was a delight to have in
There
class.
you go.
Not kidding.
See, we're a good balance. We're all a good balance. I am a big believer in birth order, and I'm being the oldest and being the only girl. I think there are certain, not that everyone's the same if you happen to be an oldest or a youngest, but I think there are certain personality traits you take on. And I'm sure you.
Well,
guys
my
see some
wife
of
is
this
an
with
Amanda, and also the oldest of three, and hopefully she's not listening. Kind of a control freak, wants to completely control
Perfectionist.
everything.
The word you're looking for is perfectionist.
Whereas I'm number 4, and I just let stuff roll. I'm the fourth in my family, and there's only certain things I engage in that I.
And I do find, and even in couples, I've noticed a lot. There are a lot of oldest paired with youngest, and maybe it's just like that's how my parents are, that's how me and my husband are. I see a lot of my friends that way. I think it's an interesting dynamic that a lot of times the oldest will end up with the youngest because those personalities kind of balance each other.
Because the youngest are used to being dominated by the oldest, and the oldest is used to doing the dominating.
Hey, the oldest is used to filling in the gaps for the stuff that the youngest often
that's true
forgets.
too. Well, that's right.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Exactly.
And then the youngest can balance out some of the more intense characteristics of the oldest.
Okay. I guess I dominate and control myself.
Yeah.
I don't know because I'm an only
You're
child.
an only child. And I think that actually becomes a different dynamic when you're the only child.
Okay, we're going to move on to the viewers. Instead of a word from you, we're having questions from you. So some of our viewers posed some questions. This is from Michelle.
Before you get into that, can I just say I love you. You put out a call on Facebook for these questions.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that you had to go back and edit it and say personal, but also please keep it appropriate.
You always have to put that. There's always one in the bunch. So
Continue.
Michelle Autry would like to know, why are you guys always changing staff? Question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. I think this is a fair question.
Yeah.
And people often ask this, you guys can't seem to keep anybody. I think people need to understand, one, we work under contracts. So typically you sign for a year, 2, 3, it depends. So when that contract's up, both the company and you have to make a decision whether you want to move on or not, or what's going to happen, or you re-sign.
And in this business, when people a lot of times are looking to go to a bigger market, that's in a lot of ways, that's how you advance.
I would say this is a medium-sized stepping stone.
Yeah.
ABC 27. Typically, back in the day, you would start at a very small market somewhere in Tennessee or, like I did.
North Dakota. Yeah.
And then you move on. When your contract's up, you try to move up to a bigger station. So that's part of why you see the turnover. Most jobs don't have contracts.
But here, especially for the size we are, we have a lot of people who have stayed. And
I was just going to point out,
right.
Yes, there's a lot of the reporter turnover, I guess, is accurate. But if you look at
the anchors have been here quite some time.
So the hiring order is this. So it was Greg Mace. He's pushing 40 years here, I think. Me, I'll be here 25. Val will be here 25. Alicia will be here 24.
And
Flora
got here right
20
after
something,
that, right?
20 something.
Yeah.
So to say there's
Flora
great
just celebrated
turnover.
her 20th, I think.
Yeah.
And Eric Finkelbein has been here 15, even though he was behind the scenes for a number of those years. And I think, I think the practical answer is this: if the pie is only so big of the money they want to spend, and you've got some of those other people, there's only so much you have for the other ones, and then so when there isn't a lot of money,
right.
But people come here for different reasons.
Yes.
Right. And I would say, some people get out of the business. Some people want to go to other markets. Some people have kids and decide.
Ryan Coyle, who I get, and I bring his name up specifically because I've been asked about him 3 times at the farm show last Friday.
One of our meteorologists.
Former meteorologist,
recently.
terrific guy. Coyle's Choice, you may remember that. That was a lot of, but he has a young son, Hudson, and really wants to focus on being a dad, and he was doing weekends,
Yes, for a
and
long
the
time.
hours were terrible.
And it wasn't going to change.
And that's the other, and it's not going to change because Eric Finkenmeier, Brett Thacker are also very good. They're here before him.
Yep.
Also young guys, so it's not like you can say, so whoever's behind me can say, well, how long is that guy going to be here?
Right. Well, that is part of it.
I don't think there's anyone who wants to take over the Capitol beat, Dennis.
But so there's some practical realities, and he made a decision for his family to move into something else. So I applaud him. He's a terrific fella.
Right, you do make a good point. How the anchors have been here a long time, and if you would go to other markets, I think you would see the same thing. That a lot of the reporters are changing every so often because that's just the way our business works. I've been here coming up on 14 years. And I wanted, like I said, I grew up watching the station. I knew this is where I wanted to work, and I like being here.
You and Dan Tomaso.
Yeah. So
Dan Tomaso, as a fifth grader, wanted to be a weatherman not just a weatherman, and not just in the Harrisburg market, but at WHTN.
Yes.
Yep. I have a tape of myself saying something like it wasn't working for you, but it was something along those lines. And it was back in the day when 27 did the number one thing at the end.
Yes.
There's a VHS tape. Like, this is how long I've been wanting to do that. And that kind of leads into our next question.
What's a VHS tape?
Yeah. Well, yes, that too. But how did each of you decide to get into the business? I just explained to you guys. I grew up watching it. I loved telling stories. And like witnessing something and then relaying it to people. I would always do that growing up. This is what happened, and that's kind of what we do. And I have videotapes of myself reporting at like 10 years old. So it was just something I always wanted to do. So what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think going back again to those public meetings I would go to with my parents, I would bring a little reporter notebook with me to the school board meeting and write down what happened, go up and ask the school board members questions. I think that threw them off a little bit.
At least then they answered them.
Yeah,
And they're
sometimes.
probably like, oh, what a cute little girl.
Yeah.
Needless to say, 10 years later, we
They were
want answers
probably
for
thrown off by
taxpayers.
how intense I was. But then when I was 13, our local newspaper, Union Leader in Manchester, had free journalism courses to the public that they offered through it's the Nacke S. Loeb School of Communications. And so I saw an ad for that in the paper, and I signed myself up. I put in the application, didn't think anything of it. My mom dropped me off, and I was the youngest one in the class by about 30 years. She said, "Do you want to stay?" I said yes, and I loved it. And from there, it wasn't even really a question.
Well, I was one of those ones whose parents said, you can be whatever you want to be. I said, okay, I want to be second base for the Philadelphia Phillies. And that didn't work out. That wasn't going to work
Dennis,
out.
where are you from again? 'Cause I'm confused.
And then I wanted to be the next Frank Sinatra. Well, that didn't work out either.
Which Dennis does sing around.
So it is not true that you can be whatever you want to be, especially when you're, my height and my athletic ability or singing ability. And so, but I knew I kind of fell into it, but I just do love it, and the performing aspect, but also I like to be the person that informs people.
All right, we kind of answered. I think it's Nathan Rootlinger. I'm sorry, Nathan, if I
I went to school with him.
Oh, there you go. He says, if you weren't in your current profession, what else would you do? So obviously, Dennis wanted to be a baseball player or Frank Sinatra.
Yes, singer or a baseball player.
What about you?
My mom says almost every day that I should have been a lawyer. So
Yeah.
maybe that. I don't know. I feel like I would still need something where I felt like I was holding people accountable. A lot of people transition from journalism to public relations, and it's a great job and a necessary job, but I don't think I could do it.
What about politics?
Oh.
I'm surprised, and this is a story I have to do. I'm deviating here. I'm sorry I just jumped on you.
That's fine.
But in 2017, last year, women did well at the ballot box. So there were 7 women statewide judges, 7 women won. Okay?
Yeah.
Much to the consternation to some of the DAs who feel they were more qualified than a couple of the women that actually won.
Right.
In 2018, in our viewing area, there are 3 open congressional seats. There's not a single woman running for any of them. That just mystifies me, because they would likely win if it's a qualified person.
I think a lot of
so
that.
I'm trying to push you that direction.
No, well, so part of my issue would be, and I'm a registered independent, not just for journalistic reasons. I really, truly don't find that either party encapsulates.
Do you find them both distasteful to you?
Yeah,
And I think working in this
think most
business,
people
when
feel
you
that
learn
way.
to question both, you realize how much hypocrisy there is, and that can jade you
Yeah.
a little bit. But you do realize that good people need to run. I don't see myself doing anything like that. I feel like if I were in any kind of position, it would need to be more of like a fiscal watchdog position,
Right.
or something with the Office of Open Records or Ethics Commission, or something where you still have that level of accountability, because that's the part of this job that
And since we're in personal mode, you raise an interesting question about registering independent, which is a lot of my journalist brethren do that. I don't, because in the primaries, you can't vote.
Right.
So when I lived in
Cumberland
Harrisburg
County.
for many years,
Right.
I was registered Democrat.
'Cause that's the
I
only
now
way you
live in
get a
Cumberland
say.
County. I'm registered Republican.
Because the
My
primaries
rationale-
decide the final
primaries
election.
decide the districts are gerrymandered in my view. And in Harrisburg, the Democrats are going to win at least the local election, so I might as well have a hand in picking the Democrat.
Right.
And in Cumberland County, the Republican's going to win, so I might as well have a hand in picking the Republican.
Well, I mean, speaking of running for office, Dennis, I mean, come on.
Well, no. The aforementioned wife and 3 children is.
It's a hard job, and I know we go after politicians a lot, but and especially the more local you get, the more I think thankless the job gets, and the tougher it is. It's a really hard job, and I think that's why you don't see as many people necessarily stepping up to do it.
Yeah, I would
Kendra,
agree.
in a different world.
In a different world, I would be a rock star. I also
You
would-
are, Kendra.
in my mind. I would also, if I wasn't doing this, I would do like documentaries on. I loved National Geographic growing up. I love traveling to third world countries. I know that seems weird, but I think it's a humbling experience when you travel like to the Philippines or Honduras and see how other people are living. It's a reality check.
Yeah, we know how the president described those countries. So.
Right. But I enjoy those type of things. I would be doing something with that. If I could just travel and help, I know this sounds so silly, but help people in some way, that's what I would be doing. But, here I am. So
I think due to time constraints, we should
we're gonna
probably wrap it up.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys for sharing. We could talk about ourselves
Was the next
all day
question
long.
going to be a tough one? Is that why you're...
She saw my next question and was like, we better wrap this up.
I need to make calls to the governor's office. Let's go.
All right. Well, we could talk about ourselves all day, I'm sure. All right. If you'd like to check out the links to there are no links to the stories, I guess. If you want to check out more about us, our bios
we
are
need
on
to find
abc27.com.
the show that
I
you
will
did.
do some investigative work and pull up some of those clips.
The
Please
open
don't.
to her
Yes.
cooking show.
It's quite
What's
embarrassing.
cooking?
Yes. All right. To get on Deadline delivered directly to your phone, tablet, or computer each week, subscribe in iTunes or Google Play Music. Record your thoughts, questions, and suggestions about episodes and voice memos on your phone and email them to us at theinvestigators@abc27.com. Please take a few minutes and leave us a review on iTunes. It helps our podcast reach other people and helps us figure out what we can improve. Thank you, Eric Semmel, for producing this podcast and listening to us talk about ourselves, and Jason Dietz for composing and recording the music. It is time for us to go. We're on Deadline.